Hi everybody, it's Stefan Molyneux from Free Domain Radio. Hope you're doing very well. This is my thoughts as people have asked me on the Assange case and WikiLeaks. Let me read you a quote. This guy should be in jail for the rest of his life. He is an enemy of the United States, actively endangering people, and he's going to get a lot of folks killed. I think that's a despicable act, and we should treat him as an enemy combatant and as an absolute enemy of the United States. Now, is this, say, the administration that began illegal wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, that invaded Afghanistan, even after the Taliban offered to hand over Osama bin Laden if the US could provide a shred of proof that he'd been involved in 9/11? The administration is claiming that the WikiLeaks revelations about diplomatic spats are endangering people because, you see, the administration of the United States is so desperately concerned with the safety of people that they don't have 700 plus military bases overseas. They don't have foreign illegal war crimes going on. They were so genuinely enraged and upset, as you remember, all of the talking heads and the political figures when the revelations came out about the authorization of torture, the implementation of torture, what is called double-clicking in the military, which is shooting the wounded, a direct violation of the Geneva Convention, which carries the death penalty in US law. Remember how concerned they were about that? Oh, how about how concerned they are, these people who are very concerned that people not be put in danger. How concerned are they about the drug war and the degree to which millions of people are being thrown in jail for innocuous non-crimes? Because they're all about, you see, making people safe. How concerned are they for the next generation, who they're heaping trillions of dollars of debt on? Because they're all about, you see, keeping people safe and protected. This is a hit that is being called for on Julian Assange for these revelations. That was Newt Gingrich, of course. Glenn Beck said that Julian Assange should be tried for treason and executed. Mike Huckabee said, quote, "Whoever in our government leaked that information is guilty of treason, and I think anything less than execution is too kind a penalty." Bill O'Reilly said leakers are traitors who should be executed or put in prison for life. Dianne Feinstein, senator, says prosecute Assange under the Espionage Act, which has never been used against a third party and was actually created in World War I when lots of people, including Eugene Jebs, the socialist leader, were thrown in jail for protesting World War I. Sarah Palin said to target WikiLeaks Julian Assange like the Taliban. Peter King, congressman, wants WikiLeaks designated a terrorist organization. A terrorist organization. So the people who are actually doing what WikiLeaks is revealing, they're not the terrorists. It's only people pointing out or revealing what they're doing who are the terrorists, right? So it's not the murderer who's the murderer. It's the witness who reports him to the police who is the murderer. Madness. You couldn't make this stuff up. Eric Bolling of Fox News, Assange should be put in jail or hanged in a public forum. Wayne Simmons of Fox News calls WikiLeaks a terrorist organization. Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters of Fox News, I would execute leakers. Liz Cheney, daughter of Dick Cheney, said Obama should shut down WikiLeaks and prosecute Julian Assange. For what? Under the First Amendment, he is free to publish the information that he received. He's not the thief. And are they going to prosecute every single news organization, of which there are hundreds, who published all of these revelations? Mike Rogers, congressman, calls for treason charges and execution. Rush Limbaugh, back in the old days when men were men and countries were countries, this guy would die of lead poisoning from a bullet in the brain. Tough guy. Get on the goddamn treadmill. Todd Schmidt, Assange, he's a radio talk show host. Assange is a terrorist, an enemy combatant, and needs to be treated as such. Steve Gill, radio talk show host, said Assange should be targeted as a terrorist and captured or killed. Madness, 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 madness. Even the Canadian, an advisor to the Canadian Prime Minister said that he should be executed. Well, this is all just, it's a hit, right? This is what would happen in a mafia movie. When somebody was going to testify, they would simply put out a hit on him, and that is what is going on here. Now, what's very interesting to me is that this rage didn't boil over on the revelations of the US gunning down from helicopters people trying to rescue somebody who was wounded in Iraq. It didn't really boil over about this diplomatic stuff, of which, yeah, there's some pretty nasty stuff in there, the US spying on the UN and all this sort of stuff. But I mean, most of the documents, only 15,000 of them were really secret, and none of them are top secret. So it's more gossip than it is revelation. So why are these people going completely insane? Well, I'll tell you why they're going completely insane. It has nothing to do with the past. It has everything to do with the future. The reason why Americans are going completely hysterical, mob, psycho, bloodlust crazy is because of the upcoming Bank of America release, which is going out in the early in the new year. And at least this is the rumors, right? All of this is rumored, and these are just my opinions, but they claim to have 5 gigs of data from the bank executives with emails and back and forth and so on. And I'll tell you why these people are going hysterical. Well, they're in the ruling class, and the ruling class survives not on production, but on enslavement and debt of slaves, selling off slaves for the future. They are the tax farmers. They survive on financial manipulation, short-term gains. They are fiat currency, blood-soaked, leechy parasites from hell. And anything which threatens the financial system that they feed on, or that they use to feed on you and I, threatens their very existence, and therefore they can't have any of that. So what's going to happen, this is my prediction, what's going to happen is that the foreclosure crisis, the foreclosure mess in the United States is going to come to a head when WikiLeaks releases this information early next year. And the reality of it is this. The home that you own, or tragically used to own, the mortgage has been sliced and diced, cut into confetti, and thrown into the 4 winds of blowhard profits. It has been sold to a pension fund in Singapore, and a teacher's fund in the Netherlands, and 5 guys on a ferry, and 1 guy on the space station. Your home has been sliced and diced and repackaged and sold as a bundled up financial instrument to so many people, that in all practical terms, there's no possible way to figure out who owns your home. No possible way to figure out your home. Nobody owns the deed to your home. It is scattered and scattered and scattered and blown about and repackaged and remortgaged and debt and financed and then subsidized, and nobody owns your home. There's no legal trail. Here's a graphic of a guy who tried to figure this out. Kind of complicated. This is your property rights in the government world, right? Because the government's all about simplicity and clarity and usability. So this is what's going to happen. The revelations of the Bank of America, or whatever bank they have, these revelations are going to prove that the bank knew it did not have ownership but foreclosed anyway. This is going to provoke a massive flurry of lawsuits against banks for people who've been illegally evicted from their homes, an outright theft of the home. This is going to cause the assets that the bank loans are dependent upon, like people who lend to the bank do so because the bank owns certain assets. If the $5 trillion worth of mortgages in the US fall under heavy suspicion, in other words, if the bank can't say that these are genuine assets that it owns because it can't produce the paper which says it owns these homes, then the the asset to debt ratio that the banks are enjoying will completely collapse. The assets will fall into question, the loans will be called in, and the financial system in the US will effectively collapse, or it will require a further injection of monopoly money from the rat-fink Fed. So this is what they're all concerned about. These people all have money in the stock market, they all have money in banks, and they know what's going to happen if the upcoming WikiLeaks revelations about possible bank knowledge, I would say certain bank knowledge, of the illegality of these home seizures is going to come up. There's going to be a massive collapse. But, I mean, so there's some, you always follow the money, right? Follow the financial incentive. It's nothing to do with the protection of people. It is the ruling class protecting its own predatory gains by, I would assume, influencing foreign governments to resurrect charges that were dropped. These sex crime charges, I assume, is just a massive smear. Everything the government says is the opposite of truth. And these charges in Sweden were dropped, and then a new prosecutor came along and they were raised again, and I assume this simply comes from bribery or threats from the United States, probably both. No proof, but it doesn't take a weather vane to know which way the wind is blowing. But more importantly, I think, if you really want to understand what's going on in the WikiLeaks scandal, I use the word advisedly, It's very, very important to understand one basic fact about human beings. And I say this from a quarter century of hard-won knowledge. When people are talking about the government, they're really talking about their families. When people are talking about God, they're really talking about their parents. It's a very, very fundamental psychological reality that if you don't understand it, the world will make no sense at all. So I'll tell you what this is really going on. So let's imagine for a moment that you were sexually abused by some uncle when you were a child. And then one Thanksgiving dinner or one Christmas dinner, you put your knife and fork down. Everybody's sitting there, your uncle included, sitting across from you. You put your knife and fork down, you clear your throat and you say, listen, I have something that I need to say. Uncle Joe here sexually molested me for years when I was a child. Now, this may not be true for all families, but I believe it's true for most. Certainly my experience is true for most. Who is your family going to be upset with? The person who committed the crimes in the family or the person who has revealed them? I don't think you have to look very hard in your heart to find the answer to that question. That almost all families, in my experience, will be upset with the person who has revealed the crimes, not with the crimes themselves. It's tragic, it's awful, it's hypocritical, it's vile, it's cowardly, it's wretched, and it's virtually inevitable. When you rip the mask off the feral snake face of power, it is the person who rips the mask off that people get mad at. Humanity inevitably shoots the messenger, and we're trained to do so. Because if we don't attack each other, those who are in power can't stay in power. It's the basic reality of power. You have to get the slaves to attack each other. You have to get the livestock to attack each other for daring to breathe the word farm in order to continue to farm them, because we are livestock for our ruling masters, and we can't call them by their proper names. We can't call each other by our proper names, because it is the person who identifies the evil who is labeled evil, not the evildoers. That's inevitable in human society. So all of these people are doing, all of these fine fucking Christians, all of these fine Christians calling for a hit on a man who has published some information about their doings. All of these fine Christians. I've scoured the web in vain to try and find any Christian leaders who are condemning these fine, upstanding Christians for calling on the murder of a foreign third-party national. Because you're supposed to love your enemies according to Christ, right? Haven't seen one condemnation. Maybe they're out there, maybe I haven't seen them. These fine Christians, this family, this mob, this pyramid of organized crime, breaking out the pitchforks and the brands and the hanging noose for a good old-fashioned lynching. It is pitiful, it is tragic, ferociously immoral. And until we see the true crimes of those who rule us, inevitable.